Hello, everyone. This is David Curry. We have a special guest today to talk about Iran. A lot going on. There's been a battle for the hearts, minds, and philosophies of Iranians for many years. We're going to be talking about any number of things around that. Our special guest is Erica Kasraie. She is the executive director of Living Water Productions, an independent filmmaker, a journalist. She has many, many hats that she wears. Human rights advocate is probably the one she's best known for. Erica, thanks so much for taking the time to talk today.
Thanks for having me on your program. I'm
So
grateful.
you obviously have a background with Iran. Tell me about your interaction with your history with the country and how you came to be such a strong advocate for Iran, not just in the midst of this war, but for many years now.
Well, my family fled the Islamic Revolution shortly after the beginning, I would say several years in. A lot of people think revolutions happen overnight, but the Islamic Revolution spanned over the course of probably a year. And I was a child. I really don't have a lot of memories, but the memories that I do have are so vivid because so much happened in that time. My father's family was Baha'i, and my mother's family was Muslim, is Muslim. And during the revolution, the religious minorities were persecuted, and the Baha'is were among the first to be persecuted. So my father's family fled and was able to leave Iran and come to the United States. And unfortunately, my mother, my sister, and I did not, get to leave at that time. But we eventually made it to the United States. We spent some time in Italy as refugees. And really, I grew up and became an American. My mother taught me the American dream, and it wasn't until I probably was a teenager that I started to sort of wonder what happened to Iran. Where is Iran? What does it mean to be Iranian? And I started to really feel a need to learn about the history, culture, the politics, and I think when I became an adult, I think I feel like I'm an adult now, but once I became an adult, I really felt like I needed to participate in the conversation because what I was seeing in Washington was um, President Obama wanting to engage the Islamic regime, and that was unacceptable to me as someone who had started to really learn about what was happening and the atrocious human rights violations that were occurring. And I thought, why isn't there outrage in Washington? Why aren't people talking about this? And so I got involved with various groups, opposition groups, student groups, and I had the privilege of serving as a spokesperson for the student movement for several years. And I mean, I walked away, I came back and forth because I think during the Obama administration, the morale was really low for the Iranian freedom movement when Obama decided to do business with the enemy. And
Obviously, the diaspora essentially felt like he was rewarding, and in fact was rewarding with cash and other things, the Islamic regime. I can imagine that would have been a discouragement. Talk a little bit about then when you got involved at that point. What did you notice about the Iranian diaspora, how it communicates? Because
mhm,
it's not clear from watching the news
right.
how information is shared. What do Iranians really believe? And there, as I said at the beginning, there's a battle for the philosophy, the mind, the inputs into the Iranian psyche. Talk a little bit about the dynamic of the diaspora and Iranians around the world.
Yeah, something that I have to say I'm not proud of, but I think we've come to terms with. The Iranian diaspora was very fractured for a very long time. No one could agree on anything. Everybody was sort of paranoid of each other. And I think that is because the Islamic Republic injected fear into so many people, into generations, that when they would come to the West or when they would, immigrate to Europe, they didn't know who to trust. There's always this sense of fear. And I hope that I've captured it in the recent film that we produced is that there's so many ideas, so many people with so many opinions, But at the end of the day, what is best for the Iranian people? And what is it that the Iranian people want? Um, and the diaspora now has never been more united, at least in the last 15 years that I've been working on Iran issues. This is the most united I've ever seen the Iranian diaspora across the world. I mean, if you see some of the rallies that have been organized, you see just thousands and thousands of people just standing together in solidarity with the Iranian people. Um, and I,
What do
and
they, what do they agree on? I mean, you say they're united, but what are the organizing principles that the various groups can seem to agree on?
well, there's a name, and that name is Pahlavi. The Pahlavi dynasty is a name that is nostalgic for the Iranian people. The former crown prince, who's lived in exile since the revolution, Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi. He has been educated in the West. He has lived in the West. His family lives in the West. He's practiced the foundations of democracy. He is uniquely positioned right now in this moment to lead a transition once the regime has collapsed. There is no other name in the Iranian diaspora that people trust more. That is one unifying person that we have rallied around because he has a plan, he has a team, and he has a vision. And I really believe that he carries the weight of the Iranian nation in his heart because it was taken from him and his father in such a horrible way, I think. And so that and regime change, end of story. I mean, there is no other alternative but regime change. And I mean, I never in my lifetime thought we would get to this moment where we'd have a president, a US president who had the moral clarity to go after this evil, bloodthirsty regime that has done nothing but cause havoc in the Middle East and taken so many lives, not only Iranian lives, but American and neighboring countries' lives.
So, Mr. Pahlavi, would he be considered a prince, or what does he have a formal title, or how does that work?
Well, he was crowned prince in Iran as a child, but I think, it's interesting that you say Mr. Pahlavi because there are some in the Iranian diaspora who actually call him Mr. Pahlavi because they don't see him as a prince. But even Reza Pahlavi himself, he says, don't call me king. Don't address me as a king. I am like a father who is standing next to the nation, hoping to walk with you through this time of darkness. And I want you to get to the point where you can go to the ballot box and vote against me. I want you to have that right so that if it came up to it and you had to vote and you had to vote against me, I would be okay with that. At least you have that right, which is something that Iranians obviously don't have the right to do. So, there are many people in our community who love him and adore him and want him to be a king, but he wants the democratic process to take place. He wants people to understand that they have that right, that the power lies in the vote at the ballot box.
Yeah, and have been examples, and there are in the UK, for example, constitutional monarchies.
Right.
The I wrote an article on Substack a couple of weeks ago about the former constitution prior to the Islamic Revolution, and that was an imperfect document, to be sure. How deep is the the thinking of the Pahlavi movement? Of Reza, however you would like me to call him, are they thinking about constitutional issues? Are there discussions already amongst the diaspora about how you would restructure either as a democracy, a constitutional monarchy, these kinds of things? How deep has that resistance gone in the constitutional sense?
Well, Prince Reza Pahlavi convened a gathering of the Iranian diaspora in Munich last year, where he invited people from all walks of life every religious background, ethnic minorities, even from the LGBTQ community, to come together and to share in the vision of a free, future democratic Iran. And with that, they have established an outline, a program called the Iran Prosperity Project, which outlines every step of the way of this transition, everything from transferring peacefully, government, and up to the moment of referendum, up to the moment of the moment where people get to vote, whether they want a constitutional monarchy or whether they want a democratic republic, whatever the form of government that they want. So I would encourage your viewers, your listeners to look at the Iran Prosperity Project. It is a very, very well thought through outline written by experts, lawyers, experts, economic experts, military experts. And I'm really proud of their team because this isn't just an idea. There's an actual plan in place, and it's being shared widely with Europe and with the United States governments. So
Having worked in Armenia, other countries that were part of the Soviet Union, I noticed a pattern, and that is that the imprint of the Soviet work system. I'll use this as just an example to jump into a question about Iran. That when you came out of that communist system, the Armenians, those people who lived in the Soviet under the Soviet system, had to retrain their thinking on what work meant in a democratic capitalistic society. Now, in a similar but different way, you have a regime which has had its foot on the neck of its people and has been feeding information and controlling the sources of information for so long. How do you see, talking with Iranians the way you do, not just in the diaspora but elsewhere, what do you see as some of the ways in which the mind of the Iranian people will need to be renewed, which may be
yeah.
stuck because of their single source of information and propaganda for all these years?
It's interesting you should ask that question. I have a friend, a freedom fighter inside Iran, who said to me, my Farsi name is Saghar. He said, Saghar, I know you want to come back to Iran, but when the regime is gone, you have to keep in mind, we're talking about 4 generations of sick people. These are people who've been brainwashed, and they're going to need a lot of rewiring. You live in the West, you have a very black and white sort of vision of the world that you see, but you have to think about Iranians have been manipulated. They've learned how to lie. They've learned how to sneak around the system. You have 90 million people who are paranoid. And so it's going to take years and years of rewiring of people's brains that the power lies in the hands of the people. And it's going to require a lot of shepherding, in my opinion, from the international community and from those who are interested in nation building.
And I
So,
think the Iranian diaspora is going to play a huge role in that. That
absolutely,
people
absolutely.
returning, taking their experience in the Western legal system and in business and healthcare and other things as well. I'm sure that will be part of it. You have a new film which talks about some of the feedback. Talk about your new film. We'll provide a link for it and how that came about.
Well, my husband and I had been working on a project with a media ministry that is producing the story of Esther in a 6-part miniseries in Farsi for the Persian-speaking world. And we had the privilege of serving as the casting directors and producing the film this past summer. We met some amazing actors, and we got together with these Iranians from all over Europe, and we realized how important it is to show the different viewpoints of Iranians that are living in exile, those that have immigrated. Two of our actors were blinded by the regime. During the Woman Life Freedom movement, the regime systematically was shooting protesters in their eyes. So we had hundreds of protesters who were blinded, and two of our actors who had come. You could see the difference in opinions and personalities. Persians are very strong and very emotional, passionate people. We we actually produced a very short film with an iPhone, and this film was a direct sequel. And the reason we produced the short film was because Israel was attacking Iran during the 12-day war. And Iranians were really angry that they didn't finish the job. They were hoping that this was it. And then it sort of left us hanging, right? We were confused. Well, why didn't Bibi just finish the job? I mean, he did such a great job. And we took the emotions that were in real time while that was happening, and we filmed it. It was called Shared Horizon. And we tried to capture all of the different opinions about Iranians. Like this one says, no, I don't want a monarchy. Oh, no, I don't want to. So we tried to sort of capture all of that emotion. And then during this January massacre, on January 8 and 9, Reza Pahlavi called for people to come to the streets and protest. And the regime mowed down almost 40,000 people. And the emotions were so high, and we thought, okay, this is the moment. We need to capture this moment. And while the emotions are raw, while people are talking, while people are feeling, and I wanted the Western audience to feel what it feels like to watch people being massacred and feeling completely helpless. You have no idea how it feels to see just piles and piles of bodies and not being able to do a thing about it. And we wanted the West to know the truth. And the truth is that Islamic ideology has created such a hatred for Islam among the Iranian people because it has taken everything from them, and they're willing to die than to live under this regime. And
Yeah,
we
it
wanted to
would
capture
be
that.
seem to have reached that point. What was so one of the viewpoints would be that there's probably some who would say the prince asked these people to march to their death. How strong how strong would that sentiment be amongst Iranians?
Um, the Iranian people, I don't know if you were tracking or watching, but during those 2 days, Iranians knew exactly what they were doing. I mean, they came out with their families, they came out with grandmas, grandpas, I mean, children, young children, because they really believe that this is it. Like, we're done. We'd rather die than to live under this regime. And there are a number of testimonies from people who went out. They left notes, they left voice messages saying, if I die, I've died for the cause of freedom. And I don't know if you watched the full film, but we had produced this film um, before the attack, before Israel and the United States had made the attack. And so we were kind of hoping that this film would sort of push the narrative over a little bit and convince President Trump and Bibi Netanyahu that yes, we need military intervention. But it came. At the end of the film, we have the voice of a young lady from inside Iran who says, there is no one else responsible for my death if I die but Ali Khamenei and the Islamic regime. Iranians do not see Reza Pahlavi as, um, you know, the instigator. They only see the Islamic Republic because that's what they do. That's their MO.
Well, this movie, it's so interesting that you shot this before all of the events of the last 3 weeks because when I was watching it, I literally thought that all of that information was known while you were shooting it. It's so up to date. Uh, I really encourage people to watch it, and as I said, we'll have a link for it and share it. But that it really felt like this you already knew all this stuff.
Right.
That so it was terrific piece of filmmaking. The 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 obvious next question then would be what sources of information are the Iranians themselves getting? Because I've heard different stories. Some people say there's no internet. Other people have Skylink or whatever, various forms where they can get internet. The media, Voice of America has a role to play. What sort of sources of information are the Iranians getting now?
So there are many Iranians who have access to Starlink, and they are able to share their network with other freedom fighters. It's very, very sporadic, and they have to be really careful who they share it with because you never know. Now the regime has internet, and CNN somehow got permission to go into the country and spew and you know continue the propaganda of the Islamic regime. But for the most part, Iranians have access to Iran International, which is a satellite program that is independent. It's news and information that they're getting. There's another network called Manoto, which is also a satellite program. And then finally, we have Voice of America, which is the arm of public diplomacy for the United States. And I'm not sure how much information, I mean, it's basically just news that they're getting. But I think these media outlets have a great responsibility in keeping Iranians informed about what's happening and also educating Iranians about what comes next. Because, I see all the hype of regime change, regime change. Okay, well, in theory, that's really nice, but you have to prepare people for what regime change could look like. And I don't know, I don't think we've done a very good job of that. That's my one criticism of these platforms is that they're not really taking advantage of this historic moment of educating Iranians about the fundamentals of democracy and what that could look like.
If I if I had a magic wand and I could, wave it and make you the head of programming, the Persian arm of Voice of America, what sort of thing should Voice of America be doing? Because in a sense, if all they're getting is news, we're dropping the ball on the ability that the Voice of America and therefore the West could have to reshape ideas. Because as we said earlier, they've been getting one source of information, school, regime, all of it. Um, Somehow we got to get new inputs. How would you program Voice of America to educate the Iranian people?
I think because I grew up in America and the American dream is in my heart, and having gotten the privilege of practicing democracy and seeing the other side, Iranians so desperate for wanting freedom, but really not knowing what that looks like, is giving. I mean, they love American movies, they love American culture. I mean, everything that the regime told them was no good has totally backfired, right? They told them to hate Israel. Well, guess what? Iranians love Israel. They told them to hate America, that America was this great Satan. Well, Iranians love America. And so how do we present this great experiment, this very young 250-year-old experiment that works? What are those foundations? Can we show them what that looks like? Can we show them what religious freedom looks like? Can we show them what freedom of press looks like? Can we show them how that came to be? Discuss the role of the Constitution, how it was written, who was it written by? But do it in the language that they understand and do it in a creative way so that Iranians are prepared for nation building, that are prepared for building those pillars of democracy. One of the things that I come across over and over again as working in the religious freedom space, when I bring up religious freedom to Iranians, they say, stop, we don't want to talk to you about religion. They don't understand that religious freedom means individual freedom. They associate it immediately with religion, and right now religion is a hot and ugly topic for
It's a
Iranians.
divisive topic. So
Very
they
divisive.
never get to the freedom part. They get so hung up at religion.
Right.
And for those people watching, this idea around religious freedom is that you have the ability to make up your own mind about what books you read, about what dogma you believe, and if you so choose to change your mind. And Iranians have never had any of those experiences to be able to read freely, to decide their faith, to change their faith, to have no faith at all. There is,
Right.
however, I think, a growing number of agnostics and atheists who have moved away from Islam. And what do you hear about the spiritual condition of the country?
Well, as you know, I'm sure that you understand that the demographics of Iran is very young. We have a very young population. They're tech savvy, they understand how to navigate the internet. So they have access to well, not right now. They've had access to the outside world. They know what it looks like in their screens and in their phones, right? But they've never lived it. Now, for those of us who've lived it in the West and got to practice it, I think we have an obligation to transfer what we've learned to the Iranian people. So there's lots of program ideas, obviously, but I think for the average Iranian inside Iran, especially a young person, when you bring up religion, it's so traumatic that they don't even want to talk about it. I mean, I was at a conference in Malta with Iranians who were afraid to be in the same room with another Muslim. That's how that's how traumatic it is for them. So
Whenever I visit,
encouraging religious harmony and peace is going to be
right,
a lot of work.
that's going to be a task. Whenever I talk
Yes,
to Iranians, I like to ask them to speculate what percentage of the people within Iran would be loyal to the Islamic Revolution?
it's a
10%?
really good
20%?
question. The truth, I think most people don't want to hear it. I think there's a lot of loyalists. In fact, my husband and I were having this conversation yesterday, is that one of our friends inside Iran said, the West doesn't want to accept that there are a lot of people that support this regime. I would go as far as saying maybe 30%. It's low, but there are loyalists. There are people who actually, I mean, I've actually met people in the West that support the regime, which is scary.
Well, you could figure that there are some number of people whose livelihood depends upon the regime staying in power.
Absolutely.
And then, years ago, I learned in politics if somebody votes for a candidate, they're much more likely to vote for that person over and over and over again. Not because that person was good, but because they feel that psychologically the need to justify the previous vote, which is how you get these strange incumbent situations where everybody knows they're not good, but they keep getting voted in.
Well, no, that's not actually the reason in Iran. The reason is because of ideology. It has nothing to do with the politics. You see, Islam has hijacked politics in Iran. I mean, it's political Islam, right? And you have to imagine you grow up in a country where everything in your life is completely like locked with this ideology. From the moment you step out of your home to the moment you come back, it's engraved, right? And so how do people in Iran, I think the young generation are rejecting religiosity altogether. Many people become atheists, and a lot end up either converting to Christianity, which I've met tons of Iranian Christians in various parts of the world. But when you have the freedom to decide, when you are living in a society that gives you permission to think for yourself, then you can decide what you want, whether you want a religion or not. But when you don't have that choice and nothing in your surroundings allows you to have that freedom, you don't want to have anything to do with religion, especially the young generation. Now, a lot of Iranians are sort of becoming, I think there's a sort of a push towards rejecting Islamism as well, in terms of even Arabic words. They're trying to not use Arabic words in conversation as a form of defiance or protests against Islamization, um, or even desecrating Islamic, you know, places of worship. So there's lots of signs that we have seen, but for the most part, like some young people are sort of finding their way towards Zoroastrianism again, the ancient philosophy of thought in Iran before Islam invaded. And and most are atheists, most are agnostic or don't want to have anything to do with religion, just God, you know. It's just they make their own sort of religion in their mind of what God is.
Thank you so much. Now, where can people find your new movie and your other material that you've been putting out? You're online, I assume, but where can they find you?
Well, I'm on X, I'm on YouTube, and on Instagram. I don't know if anybody goes to Instagram, but you can find the film. It's called Occupied Homeland on YouTube. Search Occupied Homeland, you'll be able to find it. On X, I'm Saghar Kasraie, Sagharkasraie. I tend to have more traffic on X these days, but you can also find me on Instagram by the same
Wonderful.
name.
We'll provide all those links for people to click on. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed your movie. I always appreciate all the stuff you put out. And may God bless you in Iran. And hopefully, the next time we meet and talk, it'll be in Tehran together, in a free Tehran. Wouldn't that be nice?
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. You know, I was at a IRF conference in Malta, and one of the young ladies that is Iranian was there. She said, "This was so good. I wish we could do this in Tehran one day." So I said, "Why not? Let's have an IRF summit in Tehran next year."
I'll be there. I'll be
Hopefully,
there.
we'll see you at the IRF summit in Tehran.
Wonderful. Thank you
Thank
very
you for
much.
giving visibility to the Iranian people.
Happy to.